we are all now not going through the Suez Canal. We're all going around the Cape of Good Hope. We adjusted, and then that's where agility comes in. You've got to be able to adjust. When people either do not react and expect it to be the new normal, that they just waste time and energy trying to, fit a widget in the wrong, a square into a circle. It's almost like they have to almost get to the point of reading your mind.
30 years from now, is there a logistics job that you think won't exist anymore? And if so, what is it?
I think at like many places, the entry-level position gets.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Shipped. Today I'm speaking with Frank von Oldenburg, VP of Logistics at DXL Group. Frank, thanks for talking to me today. Appreciate it.
Great to be here.
So, in kind of prepping for this interview, I looked at a lot of where you've come from to get to this point, and to say you're an industry vet is putting it lightly. I would love for maybe you just to walk through kind of your journey, if you don't mind, of just how you've gotten here. Obviously, you've got a number of name brands that you've been at previously before DXL, and I would love to just set the tone of how you came up through the logistics arena and start there.
Great. Well, like everybody else who got out of college, I got a degree in international business, and what do you do with that when you're a fresh grad, right? You're not going to be put overseas or given those kind of opportunities. And I actually moved down to Atlanta just because I was living in New England and thought Atlanta would be a great city to be in. And I moved, and I just took the first job I could get. I honestly fell into it. It was this working nights doing import entries. So I kind of just fell into it, low salary, but it was a great city. I get out at 11 o'clock at night, then go out. So it was a great job, great beginning. But it started my career. So then I was on the service side. So I was working as a customs broker, working as a freight forwarder. I went from my first job at Panalpina to a bigger company called Fritz Companies, who's now UPS. And really worked my way up and said, I have a niche for this. I love transportation. I like customs brokerage, and started moving around. So, I started in Atlanta, went to Boston, back to Atlanta, went to Chicago, and was doing well in sort of a niche freight forwarding market. But then I said, I almost got challenged. People were like, well, you're kind of a terminal operator, right? You're just a guy who works and moves trucks, not understanding it. I was like, I'm in logistics. And so then I took the challenge and went on what I'd say the customer shipper side, importer shipper side. So that was a big catalyst. And every time I made a move, I almost made it either laterally or for less money. And that's a piece that I share with people is don't be afraid of those lateral or even step back moves. I've made moves in my career where I could have been a second line manager. Instead, I stayed to be a first line manager because it was a new area to run a warehouse. So if there's any sort of, ideas to take from this, that's a big one. So at Fritz, I joined Pro Player, which was you did sports apparel, teams, logos onto product. And then from there, I went to various companies. I've had the fortune and unfortunate of being in the 90s where companies would close, a lot of layoffs, and that drove my career as well. And some people fold under those situations, and others say, hey, it's a new challenge, and I have to start over at a new company. I'd have to take on a new industry. And so little by little, I'd get long stints at companies. I was at Fritz for 10, I was at Lexmark for 10, and then I'd be at a .com for a year and a half, and that would close, right? I'd go to a different type of company and it may not do well. And then I'd go to Wabtec and was there for 6 years. So it was opportunities like that drove me to take on the different roles and see different aspects of logistics.
Yeah, I mean, your background is super diverse. I mean, one of the most diverse that I've talked to, especially on this, podcast. But I think you've run logistics across semiconductors and train brakes and printers and now apparel. I mean, it kind of runs the gamut. I think that obviously in that time, certainly some of that company dependent, but I'm sure other things would interest you, and maybe you take that step back, like you had mentioned, to kind of take 2 steps forward. Um, is there anything that you had to completely relearn in that time, or did you kind of feel like you were able to take the building blocks of, each of these different, like, highly different segments, right, and compound them to kind of get you to where you are?
Yeah, I think both, right? So I think we start off with the building blocks every I go into interviews, for jobs and they'll be like, "Well, you did printers, we move train parts, right? Why do you think you can move train parts?" And part me, I'm like, "Look, my job is to move things. A widget is a widget, right? At some degree, yes, they have different characteristics. Some things are moved by weight, something's moved by volume, a pillow versus a gold bar. So there are characteristics and there are knowledge-based things you need to know about dims, weight, what are the things you need to ask before you move a product. So yeah, for the most part, you can carry over a lot of it. Where it gets a little different is if you decide, like I did for a while at my .com, paperexchange.com, was I actually had to move pulp. And there you have to charter your own vessel. Now, clearly, chartering, and it's a small vessel, but you're still chartering a vessel. That is something where you don't come in with the widget mentality. It's a completely different foreign thing, and you just dig in. You take what you know, which is in this case doesn't translate well, but you're at least in the logistics realm. You understand what you're doing, point A to point B, and so there were challenges. If you move cold storage, is different than if you're going to move, like I said, the dry widget. I know when I moved coils for Euramax, I know that I couldn't put them on trains because a 5,000 pound coil, if it bursts open and uncoils, it'll take the train down. So these are things you learn along the way. Some of it by saying, "Hey, can I get a quote on this?" And then you find out they're not going to quote it. So some of it you kind of fake it till you make it. But the thing is, you continue to pursue it, right? You just take no for an answer when the answer is no, and you keep pursuing it if the answer is supposed to be yes.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's interesting. I was at Amazon prior to this, and we were focused initially on international expansion in my first role there. And what was most fascinating to me was all of the different restricted products. As an example, if you're trying to push
Yeah.
wood into Brazil or something like that, it's a restricted product, and you have to learn a lot of these nuances. I think, to your point, foundationally, moving good from A to B, like, sure, there's a lot of synergy, but there's obviously the minutia that is hard to measure. Um, kind of, I guess, tapping off of that, I mean, you've had this long career in logistics. We just experienced last year, well, this year and last year, around disruptions and tariffs and kind of more of the macroeconomic climate that's happening. But when you think about disruptions that have either kind of defined your career or maybe even been like a really tough time in your career where you're having to deal with it, what are those, and did it change how you operate?
Uh, I think they do define you. And, I'll give you two great examples. One, all the way back to Lexmark, when there was a true port strike. So there was almost one on the East Coast. Maybe it lasted a day, but this was one that lasted a few days on the West Coast. And Lexmark brought in 20,000 containers a year. So it wasn't just, "Hey, can I get this one through the port?" And we really came up with a contingency plan, and we started 3 months before the strike might have happened, type of thing, where you were preparing. So that's one where, you know, you take the idea, is it planning or is it ad hoc? And some of it's both, right? When you have the opportunity to plan, you plan. The East Coast just went through a renegotiation and we planned. Did we need that planning in the end? No, but we planned, right? So, and you talk about the Red Sea. It's another example. We are all now not going through the Suez Canal. We're all going around the Cape of Good Hope. We adjusted, and then that's where agility comes in. You've got to be able to adjust, and not just you think about it. Okay, now our transit times are 10 days longer. Okay, there's probably an impact to those on the water, right? But you better change your systems. You update everybody. Your buying period jumps up another 10 days and everybody adjusts. And then it becomes the new normal. Um, I think is when people either do not react and expect it to be the new normal, that they just waste time and energy trying to, fit a widget in the wrong,
Yeah.
square into a circle.
So maybe we can focus on that topic because I think it's fascinating to me. Obviously, there's so much that you have to account for, especially in your role when something like this is happening. And historically, there was some tools from like a technology perspective that could help you, but not a lot. And obviously today there's a lot. Some probably more helpful than others, but how has technology shaped the way that you're able to navigate, issues like this? Maybe not as much, and we can talk about AI or we can talk about, maybe even just software that you found. Is it having a high impact or is it more that you're still leaning into like the experience that you've had in trying to navigate the waters, so to speak?
I think where technology has helped is with our carrier base specifically. Their ability to give you real-time data and maybe not real-time decision making that people talk about with agentic and things like that. But what they do are able to do is you're able to see where your container is, what's is it on the vessel, is it off the vessel, has it been discharged? I think your visibility to getting real-time data is better, and that helps a tremendous a lot. Um, Outside of that, I think it is, what you do is data analytics is great, but you got to make a decision at some point, and that comes down to gut. Are you a conservative company or are you going to take risks? Are you willing to pay? How much more are you willing to pay to make something happen? I look at my time at a company that did semiconductors. They would spend the money. It was worth it. So, the return they got on that chip being moved to its end customer was worth shipping it UPS priority next day AM. Whereas if you're going to move apparel, you start doing that, you lose your margin immediately. So you learn, what your limits are based on your commodity, but you also decide to you really look at your alternatives. You've got to be clear, even if you know you're going to end up in the same place. Like, I'm not going to change my routing decision. We're going to stick with routing around the Cape of Good Hope. You better have a reason why. You better say, look, I did the analysis. If we go through the West Coast, we're going to save only 4 days and we're going to pay 3 times as much. So something that's 5,000, we're going to pay 15,000. Now, someone could say, that's where you do your homework, because if not, you're just saying, I'm going to stick with what I'm doing because I think it's right. That's probably not the. So the work is the same, even if you stay the course. I think that's
Yeah.
the message to people.
And I can imagine, I mean, obviously, you've seen the show a few times, right? And this isn't your first rodeo. So to your point around the gut check, like I think what is most powerful as well, what I can imagine somebody like you having is you have, you know, your gut check of what you believe is probably going to be the right thing. Now you hopefully have some access to a little bit more data that you wouldn't have had previously that you can kind of mirror that, maybe even fact check that you're on the right path. Um, how are you guys thinking about AI specifically? Is it something that you guys are starting to play with? Is it something that you guys are maybe looking at more of like forecasting type, or is it on your radar at all?
It's on my company's radar. And it is from a sales perspective, and it makes sense in that world. Like, it's, determining or figuring out what your customer wants when they want it. If AI can help with that, that's absolutely correct. Little less in operations. Again, we have the tools like TMS and WMS, and those tools are great. And yes, AI can make them better. The thing with the technology is really still the data input into it. That's been the challenge forever, especially with planning. We buy this great system. We decide that the PO, we're going to use blanket POs, and our POs are going to be able to say, hey, this is the scheduled release date, 5,000 pieces, and we're going to move 100 this day, 100 that day. And then what happens is the person doing it takes shortcuts, and they just, they use the same PO for the next 10 years. They don't use the system right. And then all that PO management tools we bought, all those SAP, Oracle things they promised, none of it works because they took shortcuts. And they're taking shortcuts because they had a staff of 10. Now they're a staff of 4. So we sort of eat on ourselves by saying we've got technology that can replace people, but then we take we don't have the people there to take the time to fill it.
Yeah, it makes a lot
So
of sense. I think, if you're looking at tools that they need to be able to, it's not just reading data from the current systems. Like if you just pull from the WMS and the TMS and the ERP or whatever it might be, it doesn't mean that, to your point, it's clean data and that you can just start to do all these manipulations with it, right? There's a whole other side of the process. And in supply chain, a process when things go wrong, right? Which is like
right.
where you really need a better layer there. And so it makes a lot of sense. And I think, the technology, I think, is moving to the sense where it is looking more at what that process would be and then like where maybe the gaps are in the data. But exactly what you're saying, it's kind of like you put a bunch of bad data in, you know, that's what
Right.
you're
Or we've got tools that allow us to communicate via that tool. Okay. Problem is, here's the tool and here's a bunch of emails going back and forth, right? So the
Yep.
problem is being dealt with here, even though, and then someone at the last minute says, yes, this shipment is approved in the tool, right? But
Yes.
all this work was done outside of it. And that's the discipline we need is how do we take all that side, if you want, side conversation into the tool so that it becomes useful and allows people to use that
Exactly,
data.
and I think then the last thing on the AI front, I think that when you look at, the ERP and the TMS and the WMS that you have, they add AI tools on top, right? And that's
Right.
great, to maybe better access the data inside of there. But, to exactly what you're saying, they can't read the emails, right? So you really need
Right.
something can be all encompassing that can sit on top that is reading the emails, that's coupling the data, right? And it has to be that true, like, um, you know, kind of central nervous system, I guess, so to speak, right? That is
You're
seeing everything.
absolutely correct. Like, it's almost like they have to almost get to the point of reading your mind, like, or so they read your emails, they read your colleagues' emails, and then they take the data they have, and it it then sorts out the problem, right? Which honestly will come someday. I don't know when, but
Yeah,
that's
I
not
think
that.
I think we're very, very close. It's
Yeah.
interesting. I was talking to somebody where they were saying, once an event happens, right? Like, okay, sure, now we know that something went wrong. We have an event. But what they were saying was like there might be 20 emails back and forth before that event actually rears its head,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you've got to capture the 20 emails because there's really critical information inside of those emails, right? That we need.
Yeah.
So, um, but yeah, it's fascinating. And so I guess kind of moving away from the AI a little bit here. One thing that I wanted to talk to you about was you guys, you have a unique model in the sense that I think I see less and less of as it relates to serving both a store and direct to consumer kind of
Yeah.
concurrently. Obviously, there's the move away from brick and mortar for a lot of folks from a cost perspective. I know that I like to go into a store and it makes a big difference. And I think a lot of consumers do. But what's the trade off, I guess, that, if somebody is either online only and they want to add a brick and mortar or they're brick and mortar or they want to add online? And is there a trade off? Is it essentially like, and how do you kind of manage the supply chain when servicing both?
Yeah, it is. Look, it's easier to be one or the other. Let's be clear, right? It's to someone to say, yes, you can do both and you can do it every day. So it becomes seamless. Like I said, it's like going around the Cape of Good Hope, eventually it becomes normal. But the complexities starts with the inventory. Where do you keep it? Right. And then you get into people like, because where's the majority of our inventory? It's in the stores, right? Why would we want it anywhere else? It's no customer is going to touch it if they can't see it or buy it. So you get into the concept of, okay, well, now we're going to have internet sales. All right, well, what will that internet sales be? Well, we'll say it's 20%. Okay, you could build a model that says, let me keep 20% of stuff, and this is the right stuff. Is it a hat? I don't know. Is it a shirt? Okay, but let's just say we even figure that out. Well, the reality is, what if it's not 20%? What if it's 40%? Boom, that model changes. So now you're shipping from stores. So you took care of it. You said to yourself, we're going to write the program that says we're going to fulfill it from the DC first. And if it can't be filled from there, well, the next place may be close to the customer. Well, what happens when it's split between three, a store, a DC, and another store, right? And you think, well, how much can that happen? I'll tell you, I'm working on that project right now. It's a 30% problem. And,
Sure.
and so you end up having So now you have a shipment that would have cost you, let's just say $10. Now you're paying 3 times 10, right? Now, sometimes it's less, and sometimes if it's combined, it might have cost 15, but you get the point. The additional cost does not go away, and there's always a minimum, right? So the complexity there is to service that, right? And honestly, all you can do is find the balance and do your best at it. What are the products that tend to go one way versus another? And we can't, our customer goes into stores. It's a guy in our case, and this at Excel. But I mean, other companies will have the same challenges, right? And if you think about it, you actually want people to go to the store. They're going to buy more than one item, or even if they return it, they might buy something else. You want the traffic. So it's also about strategy, right? How easy do you want to make internet, right? Or versus your store, you know? So a lot goes into that. And it's a constant conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it's fascinating to me. I could talk to you about this subject alone all day. I think maybe a follow-up question there is like with the extended transit times, like we just talked about, and some of the tariff uncertainty, but more that the extended times. Is there a consumer behavior that you see where you say, if it's in a store, the expectation is higher or lower from like that time to value or the speed versus it's online, or is it kind of just uniform in the way that you guys think about fulfilling across both?
I think it's uniformed in the sense of seasonality for the clothing piece. So I think they're pretty good about when they want to hit the store. I think it's really the market events affect our buyer. If, clearly with all brick and mortar, if there was a COVID event, nobody's going there, right? But also, is the weather good? Are they thinking about buying their summer outfits because it truly feels like summer finally, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so I think for us, it's those, the decision on store versus internet just is more who's our customer. Yes, they still want to get to the store. Um, and then second, but we have to have this avenue. And honestly, we're finding that the avenue of internet sales is more popular than, than not. Put it that way. It's becoming you know, a 30, 40. Who says it can't hit 50% now? That, so you have to be ready, and you also have to say, okay, we made this decision, we have to be able to fulfill it. And that's why we're not going to cancel an order because we're going to fulfill it from 3 stores. We're going to fulfill it. Right
Mhm.
now, the question is, how much inventory do you carry? Do you decide to say, look, we can't keep fulfilling it this way? Do we decide that we're going to carry more inventory so we can keep some here and still fulfill the stores? And that's a whole can of worms, right? On value of dollars and what's, you know, and lost sale and things like that.
Y Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the complexity there is enormous. It's super interesting to hear you say kind of that rise to online. I think, we go through these different troughs, and it'll be interesting to see where it comes out. But I think obviously the Amazons of the world have kind of, set the tone for the 2-day shipping and kind of the immediate gratification there from to your doorstep. But I think,
That
still
is a
again.
challenge.
Yeah.
That's a challenge because now I have to look into, can I do I had a whole project on same day delivery
Really?
on an article that you might not look. This isn't a toiletry that you forgot, or it's a shirt. You would think someone didn't need, like, oh, I forgot my shirt. Now that does happen if they went to a wedding and also they forgot to pack their shirt. But we went through that whole cascading of, should we be setting up a program to match same day delivery, 4-hour
Yeah.
delivery. Um, and it's something that we continue to look at.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think to your point, it might be somebody's, wedding or like that urgent thing that they have to, right? And being known, like the good thing for you guys is you have the brick and mortar, hopefully within, that distance. But maybe if it's not, you're able to still tap that last mile. One of the questions I had for you is I would assume that you're probably managing a lot of those carrier relationships across, parcel and LTL and ocean and um, how do you think about things? I mean, we have a lot of rate volatility happening right now. I talked to somebody earlier that is just it's a consumer's world, I think, in a lot of ways, a customer's world with the shippers, where you can kind of expect to have a higher level of expectation around pricing and some of those things. How do you think about that as it relates to just like the like what's happening? Is it something that you're assessing on a month over month basis? Certainly there's contracts and things like that, but how close of an eye is that for you?
It's big on ocean freight. So I would say for parcel, you get your contract and you stick with it. And honestly, you really they do a good job of offering the people that are in their contracts at the certain rate level or certain volume. Those people are insured to get a decent,
Mm.
you can quibble, but
Yeah.
you're safe. You don't have to say, am I getting ripped off today or am I losing ground? Ocean freight is the problem, is because it drops and the carriers drop their rates. But what you need to do there is have the best of both worlds, where you have a commitment. You work with we happen to work with the shipping association that gives us space when we need it. We've been with them forever, so they don't necessarily require us to give them a commitment, but there's a committed amount, and we consistently use them, but we take advantage of the spot market when we can to bring in some lower rates.
Yeah.
um the truth is, those low rates, and again, we start off at a decently low rate. And yes, sometimes the market beats us down here. Yeah, have I missed out on some of these? You bet. But is it overall, it we are taking advantage of both and making sure we're consistent. I'll tell you what, I won't get fired for missing a rate. I will have trouble if I'm not consistently getting my product in the door when they need it, because you don't want to be the guy that says we're missing sales, right? So you
Yep.
got to really balance out and understand what's important.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think and that I think that's like a really good theme, especially for some of the folks listening as well, is like you're gonna go higher or lower depending on just what's happening. But at the end of the day, like your KPI is tied to, just having the inventory in the store, having the inventory available, and again, like you
Yeah,
have to
absolutely.
I think a lot of times we focus really hard in on that specific rate. When you like look, you zoomed out, it actually doesn't matter that much.
No, it creates a silo, right? Like
Correct.
if I yes, I get measured on cost savings for sure. But if I take my eye off the ball, then you know, I'm not. You got to look at the overall company, and that's our
You
goal.
almost have to have your guardrails, right? Your high
Yes,
low. If it's a guardrail directionally, like we're
that's
good.
right. You're right.
So,
Yeah.
Frank, the last question I have for you is maybe a little spicy. And so feel free to divert if you don't want to answer it. But I think that you've seen this rise of logistics and technology and all these things blending into it. And I'm sure that as you're looking at everything happening, there's also a lot of uncertainty, I think, just for everybody. But 30 years from now, is there a logistics job that you think won't exist anymore? And if so, what is it?
I think at like many places, the entry level position gets um there's a lot, and I it's happening today. There's a lot we can do on research or report writing. All the things we bring in an admin or an analyst to do for us can now be done. I could do it myself without giving up hours. So and there's this gap in logistics. You've got people like me, and then you've got even on my staff, I've got two great young people, 30s and 20. And if we don't stay connected for a while, how is that 30-year-old ready to become the next me, right? And I think that's the gap. Some ways, like a DXL says, oh, you know what? We don't have a Frank, so we went out and hired him. But at some point, you're not going to, there's only going to be so many of me's to go around. And I don't want to sound arrogant with that. I'm saying that position, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so that is the gap, is ensuring that the company doesn't do itself a disfavor by not bringing in a young resource to bring up and train and develop while you're, at the cost of that or at the benefit of these AI tools.
Yeah. I mean, I think it makes perfect sense. And obviously it's an evolution. And I think that we're seeing a lot of these tools be able to be used right away in folks that prior to wouldn't have maybe they're not coming from technology backgrounds or engineering backgrounds. They're able to do those things. And so it's a very unique time. But well, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been awesome. I guess before we wrap up, if people want to follow along with you, are you active on LinkedIn, or where can they follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn, so it's probably the best way if someone were to reach me or want to see a post or something. But yeah, pretty limited on social media, just rather not to be. But yeah, that's the one area that I'm on in check.